It's a Chiefs Day on SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Wednesday, June 3rd, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Chiefs beat writer Sam McDowell stops by to talk about some recent developments. For the first time in nearly 30 years, the Chiefs won't leave the metro area for training camp. In the COVID world, the NFL has ordered all teams to conduct camp at their facilities, and that means no St. Joseph or Missouri Western State University for the Chiefs this summer. That's been the team's training camp home since 2010. The 2 decades before that, it was at River Falls, Wisconsin, and before that, up at William Jewell in Liberty. Sam and I talk about what coming home means for the Chiefs. Later, we'll get into some comments made by Chiefs players on social media during this week of racial injustice protests around the nation. After a break, we're going to hear from new Chiefs assistant coach Andy Hill, who will be working with the special teams. Hill was a longtime Mizzou assistant and is preparing for his first season in the NFL. In a Zoom call with reporters last week, Hill discussed the transition from college to the pros and what appeals to him about football at the professional level. So let's get started with Sam McDowell. Sam, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Hey, great talking to you. Herbie Tevis usually would be with us talking Chiefs, but he's loafing today at his home. No, he's got a house issue he's got to deal with. But happy to have Sam here. How you been doing, man?
I've been doing really well. I think the quarantine is a little bit easier on us sports writers who spend a lot of time at home anyway, right?
It is. It did. We would be. Of course, we would be covering Royals now.
Sure.
There'd be OTAs, of course, for the Chiefs. I can't even remember what stage we would be in right now here in the first week of June. Maybe the full OTA.
Yeah, end of phase 3 for the full OTAs.
Yep. But the NFL ruled that, or at least announced that there would not be any team activities until training camp. And both of those topics, training camp and team activities, are what I wanted to talk to you about because there is news on both fronts. Again, there were no getting together as a team until training camp, which would be sometime in the fourth week in July. And as we know now, no training camp away from the team facility. Now, that doesn't impact a majority of the NFL teams, but for 10 to a dozen NFL teams, it does have an impact. And one of those teams is the Kansas City Chiefs. So what are the Chiefs going to miss by not having training camp at Missouri Western State University in St. Joe, Missouri, where they pack their bags and head off for 3.5 weeks to a month every year? Have been doing so since 2010. What's the effect, or could be the effect of that, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen NFL teams in general sort of migrate back to their home facilities. I think for easiness, it's easier to do everything at home. The cost obviously is beneficial.
Savings, right?
Yeah, to the teams and the players themselves. So, but Andy Reid has always liked going away, even if it's just up north to St. Joe, about an hour north, because the players are all together. You've got a bunch of new faces coming together, staying in dorms. It forces team bonding, and he talks about that every year on the first day of training camp. Why do you still come up to St. Joe? And that's his answer every year. And
so we get that sort of that welcoming press conference with Andy, with the team, but it's not just Andy, right? Mark Donovan, the team president, really the business side president of the Chiefs, he holds a press conference every year, and then we get the mayor usually of St. Joe and Missouri Western president and athletic director, and it's a big celebration for St. Joseph for sure. But I don't know what discussions those people have behind closed doors. But the Chiefs are happy enough with St. Joe to have signed an extension, a story that you wrote back in February, for a few more years. How many more years were the Chiefs going to be up there? At least from the contract they signed in February.
Yeah, it's supposed to be this year and next year, but then there's a 2-year option that seems. I mean, if you throw an option on a contract like that, it seemed likely that would be picked up. And there was supposed to be some renovations this year. That was part of the agreement, including some extra seating and stands, because I think that we all anticipate the demand for tickets and people getting in to watch this team was going to be much greater coming off of a Super Bowl year. And now we don't know this for certain, but I think you and I and Herbie and everybody else here anticipates that it's much less likely that the fans will be involved in this at all.
Yeah, that'll be a big story when it's announced. Nothing has been announced by the team, or I don't think the NFL has announced it yet. Some of the teams, I think the Colts went ahead and announced that there would not, that the NFL's told them there wouldn't be training camp, but there hadn't been or away from the facility. But there hasn't been an official announcement from the Chiefs. Maybe that'll come later today. But I think with that might come the announcement that no fans are going to be allowed. And I'll tell you what, I've mentioned this to people for years since I've been going up to training camp on a regular basis, that it is the best opportunity to get a kind of a front row seat to the Chiefs. And it's free going up to St. Joe. It's a little bit of certainly an hour drive from Kansas City, depending on what part of the metro you live in. But you pay $5 to park. There is no admission charge to get in, and you can sit as close to the field if you get there soon enough than you ever would in Arrowhead Stadium. And you get to see the players coming off and on the field, and it's just a great opportunity. Usually autograph sessions every day, and the players mingle with the fans. I always thought that was a great scene. As after every practice, the Chiefs players are mingling with the fans on that hill, and to lose that, listen, for a good cause, of course, with the pandemic and safety measures, health measures, totally get it. But that really will be a loss for the Chiefs, especially for a team coming off a Super Bowl victory.
Yeah, I think that we all have stories as kids from what we remember our interaction with athletes and the people we sort of idolized growing up. And for me, going to spring training was absolutely one of the things that I adored. I went one year, I think I was 12 years old, and it was just awesome. To me, it made the players feel more real. When you watched them on TV to that point, they sort of felt almost fictionalized a little bit. And I think that, like you mentioned, for me, it's the kids that aren't going to get to interact, because there is just such an intimate feeling when you're out at training camp of, these guys are right there. You can look right across the field, 10 yards away. There's Patrick Mahomes standing. He'll come over and sign autographs on certain days. And it absolutely is going to be a loss for all the fans. But I think just especially the kids that are really starting to get into football.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm glad you mentioned spring training in baseball, because there's something I've thought about too as we talk about the team a little bit. When I started going to spring training in Surprise with the Royals, they had already started to turn the corner on from the 100 loss seasons to being a competitive team. And I can remember talking to Ned Yost and other coaches at Arizona about competition for positions. And Ned told me once, and I guess I never realized this, but it seems obvious now, that you don't want to come to spring training with a lot of competitions. You want to come with a team that you feel pretty good about and confident about. And that was the case in 2013, 2014, 2015, 16. And we saw what kind of teams the Royals had in those years. And I think about that with the Chiefs, going into training camp. We'll talk much more about this as training camp approaches. But going into training camp, I don't see where there'd be a lot of position battles for these Chiefs. And so I guess my point is, with rookies and other first year players, it might be a little more difficult for them to have missed all the OTA times and not get their first kind of practice session with the full team until training camp begins.
First of all, I think that that's such a Ned thing to say. My guess is the way he arrived at that answer was somebody said, "Hey, isn't competition a good thing?" And he said, "Well, no, not really."
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think that you're absolutely right. The rookies are going to miss out on the most. And I wrote about this last week, but it's pretty much all players who are trying to make that first impression with the Chiefs, whether it's undrafted free agents, rookies, or new guys to the team. And obviously the way this team is built, it's mostly those former too. And what's going to happen is, because they've missed the 3 phases of OTAs, that's your conditioning period, that's your strengthening period. And certainly these guys, they've trusted that these guys are working out. They're actually doing Zoom calls to make sure that these guys are following certain programs. but you can't replicate what an NFL strength and conditioning staff is requiring these guys to do, not just to be in shape, but to play NFL football. And because of that, you're going to have some sort of ramp-up period in training camp that you don't usually have. We haven't seen the NFL announce anything like that. I'm sure that's in the works and being discussed because of what we saw in 2011 with the lockout year when they missed OTAs. There was all sorts of injuries. The way to avoid that is to add this ramp-up period. But still, I think a rookie or an undrafted free agent is going to be inclined to push himself to prove himself. And I don't know how much, whether if they have an extra ramp-up period, if that cuts into their time to be able to do that. But there's just so many factors that are unknown right now. But I think all of them are kind of working against those first-year players.
Yeah, yeah. Also unknown is the dates. We don't have the dates for training camp yet.
Right.
Like I said, it traditionally starts the fourth week in July, and an extra week early for the teams that are playing in the Hall of Fame game in Canton, and the Chiefs aren't in that game. So sometime in after the third week of July, I expect we'll get some dates here probably in the next week or two because. I was going to say people need to plan, but people don't need to plan because they're likely not going to be there. But we need to plan, right? I mean, that's we need to know when. And
release it for our sake. Release it for our sake.
The other thing we'll miss by missing those 3 weeks in St. Joe, we don't know how the media is going to cover training camp. But one thing we've always been able to do is we cover every practice, and sometimes the training camp stars reveal themselves. People like Frankie Hammond Jr. I'll never forget the wide receiver who was a training camp hero. And I don't know if you were there the year that C.J. Spiller, the veteran that the Chiefs signed, had a couple of great plays in training camp. Everybody was so excited about him, and he didn't make the team. But there's always a guy or two in training camp that you fall in love with and think, it gets you through a day of writing, right, and reporting. But
Sure.
ultimately, they don't make the team. Hey, so Sam, before we stop, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we've seen from Chiefs players in the protests that are going around the country this week for racial injustice and racism. The Chiefs are not having media availability this week. It's the first week in several that we will not have heard from a Chiefs player or coach, and I suspect the sort of the moment is responsible for that. And but Chiefs have expressed themselves on social media. What have you seen from some of the Chiefs on social media?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of players speak out. I think Tyrann Mathieu's probably been about the most vocal, but Chris Jones, Patrick Mahomes, Juan Thornhill, Harrison Butker talked to us last week, and I mean, I know he was asked a question, but gave a really thoughtful answer, I thought, and even more impressive because he was put on the spot. It wasn't something he had time to prepare, but I just think it's a tough time for an athlete right now because there's the expectation to say something. And as much as when I was 24, 25 years old, I felt like I had the entire world figured out. I know that I didn't.
Right.
And it's tough. I think it would have been tough to say the word perfect, exact right thing in this sort of moment. But I do think any player using their platform, and like you said, we've seen a lot of Chiefs do it. It's commendable because you're putting yourself out there. It's an issue that obviously is drawing the world's attention right now. And, to take a side on it, and I think, it's pretty easy to decide which side to take, but to take any side on it is going to tick some people off. And to use your platform anyway, I just think it's really commendable with the Chiefs that we've seen speak out on this in support of George Floyd and his family and against police brutality and racism.
Yeah, some of those people that you might tick off are maybe season ticket holders, and certainly fans of the team. But I agree with you. It's an opportunity for athletes, especially with the platform that the Super Bowl championship team has.
Good point.
And the protests are in Kansas City as well as other cities around the country, and I can imagine if we surveyed those that are protesting and even the police, they're all Chiefs fans. So they're paying attention to what Patrick Mahomes and Tyrann Mathieu and Travis Kelce and all the Chris Jones, they're paying attention to what they have to say. And I haven't seen anything outrageous by them. I've seen conscientious statements and really well thought out statements. So I've seen some criticism of the statements that said they didn't go far enough in saying what they did. But I don't know. You look, I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. I commend those that do speak out, and I don't have anything against those that choose not to. That's their choice, and that's that's just how I feel about it. But again, for Patrick Mahomes, for Kelsey, for the Honey Badger, the team itself, right? They made a statement. Not every team has done that, but the Chiefs did. So good on those guys.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned, the fact that there has been some criticism of some players that maybe didn't go too far. And I guess that's what I was trying to reference and saying that, I think we have to remember that these guys are 24, 25 years old, a lot of them. And there's some tiptoeing for sure. But also, I think it's a time for all of us to be listening. And to put out the exact right statement is more difficult than I think people think, because I think the most important thing is to listen to what other people have to say about this. And so if you're an athlete, I understand you've got a platform, and I think it's fantastic to say something. And I don't think we should be criticizing that maybe the statement didn't go quite far enough when it's clearly in support of those peaceful protests and clearly against the things like racism and police brutality. I don't think we need to be absolutely word perfect on our critiques of what the athletes are saying.
Very good. Sam, it was great catching up with you, and we will talk again soon.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Blair.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening.
Vahe, how you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you. Hey, I thought I'd just ask you a quick sort of historical question. Does Trenton lean Chiefs? Were you a Chiefs fan growing up? And how did that 1985 camp go? How long did you stick? And what's your memory of that experience?
Trenton, Missouri, 1,000% Kansas City Chiefs. My parents used to take me down to the training camp at William Jewell in 1985 when I was lucky enough to have a choice between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Kansas City Chiefs. I obviously chose the Chiefs to come to training camp. And back then they used to cut every Monday after preseason games. And so every Monday you're holding your breakfast tray, hoping the Turk wouldn't get you and make eye contact with you at breakfast. But it was up until I made it to the last cut. I know that was the year they cut back, but they had a bunch of good receivers: Carlos Carson, Stephon Page, Henry Marshall, a bunch of guys that were really good players, and I was very fortunate just to get the tryout.
Did you enjoy the experience, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, it's like now. It was great back then. It's certainly a pleasure to be part of the Chiefs organization now, but I've been a Chiefs guy. I used to have a Super Bowl champion whenever they won it. In 1969, I got a sweatshirt, and a buddy, we were playing Kill the Guy with the Ball, and a buddy ripped my Chiefs sweatshirt from the Super Bowl championship, and I ran home crying. So that's my memory from the 69 world champions back in the good old days.
Let's go to Darren. Darren, go ahead.
Hey, Coach Hill, thank you very much for joining us today, and hope you and your family are doing well. Wanted to ask you, obviously, the NFL, the owners, they approved a couple of measures today, but also they tabled the 4th and 15 discussion, and amid talk that a lot of coaches and teams felt that would kind of eliminate kickoff going down the way. What is your stance on that, and how do you and what do you think about the fact that they tabled at least this discussion for the 4th and 15 change?
Well, that's certainly a question for Andy Reid and Dave Tobe, in the sense that I'm sure the reason they tabled it because it's such a wide-ranging variety of what people think about it. But I saw what Coach Reid said, and I will stick with what Coach Reid said. I think that we got guys that can make the play either way. As a special teams guy, you like to keep it in there.
Let's go to BJ Kissel. Go ahead, BJ.
Hey, Coach, appreciate your time. I just joining a new staff with new people. I know it's just kind of a basic question, but what's it been like for you just getting acclimated to, obviously, to your fellow coaches and to the players you're going to be coaching as soon as you guys are able to get together?
Well, I was there, BJ, in the very first part of March, and so the Super Bowl win was still very fresh in the building. And the positive mojo and the positive vibes from all the Chiefs, not just the coaches, but all the personnel in the entire building, was something that really was phenomenal for me, and certainly a breath of fresh air, and something that we can, if you can keep that chemistry going and all the positive vibes going, it's really special.
Let's go to Matt Derrick. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Coach. Welcome to Kansas City. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Matt.
You and Dave Tobe go back a long ways. I'm just interested in just, how's that friendship been for you over the years? What's it meant to you? And do you have any good Dave Tobe stories from back in your old days?
Well, I'm in my basement right now, and Dave Tobe, before he got hired by Andy Reid in Philadelphia, was finishing out my basement. And if you ask about half the people in Columbia, Missouri, if you have a house addition or a basement finish, Dave Tobe was probably doing that at the time he was here. But yeah, Dave and I have kept in great touch. When he was lucky enough to get into the NFL with Coach Reid back in Philadelphia. I didn't ever go out to Philadelphia, but when he got hired at Chicago Bears back early in the 2000s, I went up several times to visit him and all their other coaches, because I was coaching some special teams at the time, but also different, mostly wide receiver, but different positions. So I would go with the Bears, and then been very fortunate the last couple of years when he's been with the Chiefs in Kansas City. I recruit Kansas City for the Missouri Tigers back then, and I would stop by practice when this time of year, actually, after Memorial Day, when they were in phase 3 of OTAs, and I had a chance to go by a practice or two the last couple of years. We had always Jeremy Macklin and Chase Daniel and Mitch Morse and some guys, and so it was very fortunate to get in there and see them, and that's been our relationship's been pretty much the same the entire time.
Let's go to Herbie. Go ahead, Herbie.
Hey, Coach, appreciate you taking your time to chat with us here. Obviously, it's a fascinating time or an interesting time, but like when you got two new punters coming in here right now with Newsome and Townsend, what's your evaluation of them so far from what you've seen of the tape that they've been able to send you guys from their workouts?
Really, there's not much. Both those guys had great college careers, and with not being on the field at all during the OTAs this part of May and June, we know it's going to be decided in the fall. And then we go to fall camp and the preseason games, those guys will be head-to-head and get equal opportunity. But they both had great college careers, and we feel like both guys have a legitimate shot to be the punter for the Chiefs.
Okay, let's go to Nick Jacobs. I believe that's you, Nick, at KSHP. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Andy, for you, how would you describe yourself as a coach? And then on top of it, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your coaching career?
Nick, I'd like to think that I'm detailed, player-oriented coach that, even though I'm getting older and, have, a few gray hairs in my head, but I think that I'm a player's guy for sure. I feel like that the biggest lesson I've learned is it's really about the players, and it used to be about recruiting in the college game, and now to the NFL, it's really about the guys that you have on the field. And with the group of guys we have coming back in Kansas City, it's sure special to be a part of that.
Okay, let's go to Todd Lebo. Go ahead, Todd.
Hey, Coach.
Lebo.
How you doing, buddy?
Great.
Congratulations, number one.
Thank you.
First, how was Coach Tobe's work in your basement? Everything still standing?
So far, so good.
Not bad. Hey, you did a lot of offensive work when you were at Mizzou and just became a special teams coordinator recently. What's that learning curve been for you in special teams? I know you guys do a lot of stuff early on, especially in college coaching because of the number of coaches. But what's it been like for you to learn this new stuff?
Yeah. I was really fortunate to be involved, like with Coach Pinkel. Everybody had the special team, so I was really focused on the punt team for like 15 years. And I was also involved with kickoff return with Larry Smith and Gary Pinkel. And I've been involved with a lot of special teams over time. And in the last 2 years, I was just special teams only. So the biggest transition really is going to be the rule changes and how you deal with in the gunners going out of bounds, and certainly the kickoff rules have changed with the setting of the guys up front. So just really, to me, the adjustment is going to be the rule changes and trying to, the evaluation of talent as you get into fall camp.
Let's go to Sam McDowell. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, Coach. Can you hear me? David,
we
talked to him last week that in the conversation about you getting this job, he said you're going to have to do a lot of the BS work. I'm just wondering what still persuaded you to want to do this?
The Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, and the fact that, again, we are Chiefs fans. My daughter got married last Friday night, so we're done with that, which is great. And her fiance, now her husband, is a Chiefs season ticket holder. So we're Chiefs all the way around. And I had some opportunities to stay at Mizzou outside the coaching realm here. But it was such a great opportunity. I felt like that, I've talked about trying to get into the NFL for a few years. And although this is as he called it, a lower level position, and I'll be doing some stuff that I've had guys do stuff for me in the last couple of years. But the truth is, it's such a great opportunity to work with Andy Reid and Dave Tobe and, Eric Bieniemy and Steve Spagnuolo. Those guys are just special people and special coaches. And we got number 15. So let's go to work.
All right, guys, we got two hands up left. So let's go with Blair first, and we'll close out with Bahe. Go ahead, Blair.
Eddie, congratulations, and especially on Friday night. That's terrific, the wedding.
Thanks, Blair.
I think you've answered this in bits and pieces, but I just want to generally ask you what the appeal is of the NFL level versus the college level.
Well, I can't tell you. When it came out, I was in Kansas City for 3 or 4 days, kind of going to work, and then it came out that I was, hired by the Chiefs on a Friday afternoon, and I was driving back to Columbia from 3:30 in the afternoon until about midnight. I had my Missouri phone and I had my personal phone, and I answered phone calls and text messages and up until midnight. And it's just this, growing up a Chiefs fan, growing up around the state of Missouri, and having a chance to work with not only the Super Bowl champion, but Andy Reid and the kind of person he is, and Dave Tobe is a friend of mine at the top level of the profession. I just felt like it was something we could not pass up, and we talked it over as a family. When Coach Reid called me and offered me the job, we had some real tears and some great clapping in our house. And so we're excited to be a part of what has gone on, and hopefully I can add some small piece to next year's season.
Okay, Vahe, go ahead and close us out.
Hey, Andy, kind of a two-parter. One is you had some experience at Arrowhead before, and I just wonder what you remember most about that night in 2007. And the other thing is, too, just it's been most of 30 of the last 40 years or something you've been at Missouri. How difficult, strange is it to just go to a new locale and change your employer?
Well, I'll answer the 2007 question. It was, I would say if people ask me my greatest memory of being a coach at Missouri or even playing at Missouri would be that game against the team to the west. But whoever won that game was going to be ranked number one and have a chance to play for the national championship. So it was very special with a special group of coaches and players at that time at Mizzou. It's a great memory, obviously, and we were fortunate enough to be. My family, my daughter, and my son, we were fortunate enough to be at the AFC Championship game this year when they held up the Lamar Hunt Trophy. And usually we leave out early. Even the World Series games, we try to leave like midway through the ninth inning to beat the traffic. We wanted to see Clark Hunt raise up the trophy that night in Arrowhead. So it's pretty special. And I think that, it's unique that I was very fortunate to live and be in a place for one spot for a long time at Mizzou, and it's been very good for my family to do that. And I think that, it's pretty easy to move on when there's a different focus on the draft, different focus on the players, trying to learn the NFL rules and also try to get caught up on the teams we're playing. Dave Tobe has great knowledge of the Los Angeles Chargers and the Houston Texans and the teams we're playing early, and I'm trying to get caught up doing that. So I've been pretty busy, and even though I'm working from home, my heart's over there in Kansas City. I'm looking forward to get to going in the fall.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Tip of the cap to Sam McDowell for joining me today to talk Chiefs. Links to the stories about the Chiefs can be found in the show notes and always on the Red Zone Extra app. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It still stands, still a good one, $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage, and that includes Sports Extra on the e-edition. There's an additional 20 or so pages of national sports coverage today. Here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports, news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, and they're doing a heck of a job this week covering the protests in Kansas City. So you get all their work, plus additional news, sports, and business coverage. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. Whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again on Thursday.